And I will first ask you to say your name, where you are, briefly about yourself.
Okay. My name is Rhys Price-Robertson. I'm in Australia. I'm in a town called Malmesbury, which is about an hour outside of Melbourne. So in central Victoria, in the goldfields. So it was the area where there was a big gold rush about 150 years ago. And my house is actually 150 years old. So that's pretty old for Australia. Maybe in Poland or in Europe, that's not very old, but it's old in Australia. What else? I finished my Gestalt therapy training last year. And I'm just I've started a private practice, but I'm just in the process of really setting that up more and quitting one of my other jobs, and so that I can pursue that more. I edit a journal. I edit the Psychotherapy and Counselling Journal of Australia, and I really love doing that, although it feels like a constant pressure at the moment. I live with my partner Amy and two sons. So I've got a 7-year-old and a 2-year-old.
Oh, yeah.
Or he's turning 2 next week. Yeah, that's a start.
Yeah. I got a silly question, but have you ever been to Europe?
Yeah, I haven't. I have. I did an internship at the World Health Organization in Geneva. Probably, how long ago? I don't know, 8 or 9 years ago, maybe. And so, yeah, I was mostly in Geneva, which I know is probably not the most exciting city in Europe, but I got to travel around a little bit at the end, but it felt a little bit like a kind of working trip, and I haven't actually had a big holiday in Europe. So I very much would like to. Maybe that's something when the kids are a little bit older, do a big trip to, hopefully.
And how is now the situation regarding the coronavirus in Australia? Because I have no clue about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, initially it seemed really good. It seemed like it hadn't affected too many people, and then so we had a kind of lockdown like everyone else, I guess, and then we opened up maybe 6 or 7 weeks ago, and in Melbourne, suddenly there was a kind of outbreak. So Melbourne has now gone into lockdown, and the rest of the country is not in lockdown again. And so I'm an hour outside of Melbourne, so it's potential that we could go into lockdown again. There's some cases around. So, I mean, it's been very disruptive, and it feels a bit worse now than it has been. But compared to some other countries, it's a lot less. It's hit us a lot less, which is good.
Yeah, I asked that also in relation to you and your family traveling. Well, this AGT conference in Ireland has been cancelled because of this coronavirus, for instance.
Yes.
But maybe it's not a point of reference for you, I wonder, because, tell me, I only had an interview with Nikkei Falconer from New Zealand, and actually I am, so ignorant about this part of the world where you live, and I wonder if you really, I mean, how to put it, if you are more somehow focus on your area and Gestalt therapy in Australia and New Zealand more, or maybe only in Australia, or you really somehow aspire to be part of European Association, AAGT, I don't know, or you don't give a damn and you have your own staff and your people around, I wonder.
I think for me, probably my aspiration is more to be a part of the community of people in Gestalt therapy who are writing and publishing things, and part of a kind of conversation. So that would be more an aspiration for me rather than any kind of geographical location or anything. But I do get like pangs of jealousy sometimes when I hear people talking about, oh, I just popped over to this conference, this international conference here or that conference there, whereas in Australia we're a very long way from European conferences, so that would be a big trip. Hopefully later on, when my kids aren't so young, I can do some more traveling to conferences and so on, but at the moment, no, that feels like a way off.
Yeah. For two reasons, geographically and demographically, so to speak, because of your kids being so young. Yeah. So
yeah.
simply
Yeah.
wonder. Yeah, because for me, communities is also, especially for the last, for those recent months, community through Zooming and also discussing, writing, being together, but online.
Yeah.
At the same time, I really, I mean, I wouldn't be in this place if I didn't go to some conferences, I mean, and meet people in person, which was really,
yeah.
inspiring.
I know what you mean.
Yes.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I think, you know, I have the community in Melbourne, the Gestalt therapy community, like where I trained. There's sort of one main training center in Melbourne, and there's a community of practitioners associated with that. And yeah, like I said, it's more of an aspiration of meeting people. I guess like yourself, and like the people at New Gestalt Voices, who I'm now having a little bit to do with. That's more what I'm aspiring to, is to meet with like-minded people who are interested in similar ideas, who are doing things like what you're doing here, and so I can get involved in things like this. That feels like I'm starting to build a bit more of a community of like-minded people, as opposed to people in any one location.
And in Australia there are other Gestalt institutes apart from, I mean, Melbourne, outside.
Yep, there are a few. I'm not sure exactly how many. I think there'd probably be, there's one in Brisbane, there's one in Sydney, maybe one in Western Australia. There might be like 5, four or 5. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so this was an education on my part, and now maybe more to you. The question is about more about you as a human, and how would you describe yourself? What person you are? Not necessarily as a Gestalt therapist to be, but generally, what are your passions? What are your values?
Yeah, I thought you might ask this. I watched a couple of the other videos and I saw this question. I'm glad you narrowed it down to like passions and values. Maybe I've got something to grab onto there.
Yeah.
It's a hard question. I try not to. I was thinking about. I mean, this gives you some clue of how I am. I could say I'm like an anxious person. I've had a lot of anxiety in my life, which has got a lot less. But you know, I was preempting this question, so that's something, you know, I was ruminating on this question, and I'll try not to give you an answer that I pre-planned. I'm passionate about. I have a passion for ideas. I have a passion for, in the broadest sense, I don't really even like the word, but like maybe like spirituality, or what I would say is living a life of wisdom, or I struggle to find the terms. Maybe spirituality is the best term. I feel passionate and relatively kind of, or more than relatively, I feel motivated in that area of my life. My family is very important to me. Living in the country now, I've always lived in Melbourne, and the last 3 years now living in the country, that's becoming important to me, and that feels like an important part of my life, and being out in nature a lot, and gradually and very slowly learning to be more handy, and like learning to like do more practical tasks and things like that. that's sort of becoming more a part of my identity. I'm yeah, like I said, anxiety's been a part of my life. I think shame has been a pretty a pretty formative kind of state or kind of emotional experience for me. And my response to that has probably been a kind of in the realm of narcissism, in the realm of kind of elevating myself. That's been my response to a sense of shame. So that's been a kind of real a learning or an undoing over the last few years, and especially in my Gestalt therapy training, coming to recognize how strong that response was in me, and how much kind of undoing I have to do around that. Can you prompt me a little bit more, maybe with some follow-ups or something?
Yeah, I like it already, and I would like to, somehow touch every point, but maybe first with this, spirituality, because ideas, I don't know, maybe because of enlightenment, I associate more with rationalism and how do you find, how do you match the two, rationalism and spirituality, or maybe spirituality is rational, or I don't know.
Yeah, I think if I understand your question, you're asking something like, how do I in myself find a kind of balance, or find some common ground between spirituality and maybe a more rational or academic or self? I mean, maybe this just shows why I have a bit of a problem with the word spirituality, even though I used it. I mean, I don't think of a spiritual practice as separate at all from rationality. I would want a discerning kind of intelligence to be a part of my spirituality. I think that would be a necessary part of it, a necessary part of becoming wise. But I don't. I think there's probably been times. I think I was very, very as a young man, like when I was like 19, 20, 21, 22. I was had a whole lot of energy around meditation practice, and lived over in Asia in a monastery, and I was very motivated around spirituality. And then I kind of swung right out of that and went into intellectual, like studied at university and started working in kind of academic area. And I think I became at some point kind of dominated by thinking, or by academic kind of ideas, and lost a sense of always yearning at that stage for more of a sense of a kind of a life that was grounded in spiritual practices in some way. So in some way, I feel that I am kind of returning to a bit more of a balance. I think this is kind of answering your question a little bit. Like maybe I went quite far into kind of the into my head for quite a while, and I'm returning it in some way down into my heart and into my belly a little bit. And Gestalt is helping me do that. But I never want to lose. I certainly don't have an idea of spirituality as like letting go of thinking, or not bringing a discriminative and discerning kind of intelligence to what I do.
Yeah, I can relate to that also biographically, to what you're saying. Okay, and what else you mentioned? It's also nice that you are mentioning, that an anxiety and shame is part of your identity. I actually, it's the first time as anyone answered the question this way, although I imagine these are parts of our of life of many of us. I mean,
yeah. Well, I mean, I can't. The things that that I'm identifying is important to myself. I'm talking about the spirituality. I'm talking about Gestalt therapy. I can't see how I would have been motivated into those practices were it not for a sense of shame. Like it feels like if I'm asked like why am I interested in meditation, maybe the reason's changing now. I think it is changing now, but initially it was to escape from a very strong sense of anxiety and shame, you know. That was my motivation. So it feels very like a very powerful motivating force in my biography, I guess, or my history.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Now I know even more why it is so important, because because of this discourse of self-development, that people start to develop as if it was like so much agency in that, and of course even in this escape from there is a certain amount of agency, but anyway, self-development, it feels so positive and somehow hides this undergrounding qualities that you are pointing to. So that's why I you know that oh yeah, I would like to develop myself. I will start, and I started some trainings in psychotherapy because I wanted to whatever, but we simply somehow ignore. I mean, I don't know, it's not, it's like there is a taboo sometimes of speaking about death. Maybe there is some slight taboo of speaking about fear and shame as our motivators, really.
Even among Gestalt therapists,
even with this books on shame, this is just my spontaneous observation. I might be wrong and people might disagree, but but I was somehow struck by your response. And okay.
I mean, it's something that I question, say, around a meditation practice that I have. I question what, like, when. So a couple of times I've got serious about meditation, then maybe dropped off for a while, and then I've often started again when I'm in a period of pain, in emotional pain or turmoil, and then I have to ask myself after some time, as the pain and turmoil diminishes, it's like, well, why am I doing this? Like, what's my motivation for doing this if it's not to somehow, like, it's so clear when I'm in emotional pain of why I would be meditating, but then it's less clear when things feel like they're going okay, and when everything feels like it's going okay. So this, I'm just I guess just agreeing with you around the question of motivation, or that just came to my mind.
And who influenced you the most? I mean, in those areas. I mean, who influenced your fear and shame? In fact, no, I don't. You don't need to answer. But the question is generally about what circumstances shaped you. What kind of, who shaped you? Who were those people? Yeah, if you could say.
Well, I mean, it's the obvious answer. It feels like an obvious answer, but it feels like a true answer. Is that my parents had a very powerful influence on me and the way that I relate to the world. Probably, I was going to say my mum, but actually, no, I think both my mum and my dad. And they're very good parents in many ways. And certainly, good enough parents in that, the term that people use. But I think, I don't know, I think we all come out of childhood with pretty, wounded in some ways. And I think probably I had a stepfather as well, for a few pivotal years, like when I was maybe 6 years old to 12 years old, and that was a very difficult situation, difficult relationship, and I think that probably had a pretty big impact. And then after that, as a teenager, I think I very much was kind of yearning for my dad, who was not around that much at the time. I was yearning for other men, male role models, or just even older men in my life, and there were very few of them. So I think that had a pretty a strong influence on my sense of kind of not being okay as a man, not having other men round reassuring me that I was okay, or that the things I was going through were normal. Yeah. My parents, I guess, is my answer. My family, those closest to me, the people who I spent my time with, Yeah.
Okay. And the situations were somehow critical. I mean, critical in sense of shaping your identity and turning points in your biography.
The thing that comes to my mind, the first thing that came to my mind when you asked that was kind of having this sense as a boy, maybe, how old was I? 8 or something, 7 maybe. And I think I'd struggled before. My parents had got divorced and kind of a couple of years before. And I think I was probably struggling in a number of ways and not able to articulate that in any way, or that not able to have that held in a way that was okay for me. And then I just have this memory of at a certain time at school, suddenly recognizing or realizing that I was good at stuff. Like I was good at like a little play, acting, making jokes in class or whatever. And I was good at sports. I was very good at athletics. And so realizing that I was good at things and how much kind of value I got, or how much I was valued for those things. Mm-hmm. And for being good at things. And so when you ask that question, I sort of thought of myself as this young boy who was struggling, and then who suddenly is getting this validation for being good at stuff. And I think that had a big influence on my personality, in terms of like, feeling like I need to be good at stuff, or I need to be the best, or I need to be better than, to be okay and to feel acceptable. So I think I don't know if there's there's some little moments I can think of, but more it was just a time maybe when I was like 7 or something, when suddenly I started to get feedback from the world. You're good at things and we like you for that. That's something that came to my mind when you asked that.
Yeah. No, okay. You don't need to, dig too much. Yeah. I mean, sometimes these kinds of moments, as you described, might be, like the beginning of this narcissistic, how is it called? Kind of pain, or what is the term, whatever. But when you said that, it was really like, it is this ambivalence that is maybe in narcissism, that it was important for you to get that validation. No, this is as I imagine, and that's why you mentioned it also. Not only that, I need to now do things well so that's to be accepted, but it's good to get feedback from the world, in fact, and not to be feel alienated. No, just I don't know.
Yeah. And again, I mean, I kind of, as you're speaking, I think about the question of like motivations, what motivates me, what motivates people. And, I think about like, for such a long time, I was so motivated, or have been so motivated by wanting to like, get that validation from the world, or be the best, or whatever. That's motivated me in a number of ways, however I define the best. And it's not all bad. I mean, some good things have come from that, and it's driven me into important areas in my life. And I think about that as well with artists, or some of my favorite musicians, or people who are driven by ego and they're driven by narcissistic impulses and so on, and they create incredible art, you know. And if we didn't have people who were driven by such things, we might not get this beautiful art or these beautiful buildings, or and so I guess I do feel ambivalent about about things like ego or striving to be better than, you know. It's a painful state to be in, and it is a reactive state to be in, but there are also some positives, I think, to it, or it can be a driver of important things. I think.
Create and just to add to that, because I wonder how does the society influence this? I mean, your society comparing to mine, which is rather, these are, I imagine, two different societies we were brought up, and I wonder how during Gestalt training you were, I mean, how narcissism was dealt with during your training and how it was perceived, because I suppose that it has a lot to do also with the society and the way it is perceived, those kind of qualities people have. And so just to mention, because it's I guess that in Poland it is for some reason difficult to as you said, undo this narcissistic traits and to be at the same time comfortable with oneself. And I don't know, there is a lot of I don't know, prejudice, but there is a lot of pejorative connotations mostly. And I guess it is grounded in Polish history. I don't want to get into that much, but just to mention.
Yeah, I don't know enough about Poland to be able to talk about the differences with Australia. But I mean, I guess, you know, thinking about my Gestalt training, which, as I said, I finished last year.
Yes.
You know, it's hard to know how people saw me, or people would have seen me in very different ways. But I don't think, I could be wrong here, but I don't think that people necessarily would immediately see me in a group, or would immediately see me in my work, or and be like, oh, that guy's a raving narcissist. I don't think it's not an obvious.
Yes.
I don't think it's necessarily very obvious. It's much more. It's more subtle, and it's how I relate to myself internally. You know, and it's how I, in many ways, in whatever ways I have been able to manage in my life, have tried to lift myself above other people, you know, because I think I felt below other people. I mean, that was it's obvious, you know, it's the obvious underbelly of that. But I think probably the group that I went through with, you know, 4 years with the same group of people, and there were probably like 12 of us in the fourth year. You know, they would know a fair bit about this, but probably most because I was exploring it so much, you know, over those 4 years, and kind of waking up to it so much, I guess, that was my style, and they were kind of my core organizing themes. I don't know. And I felt supported in that exploration. It didn't seem like a lot of people didn't seem to be judging me too much or whatever. It seemed supportive. Yeah.
The reason why I'm asking is also a bit, the thing that I've been observing now, because I am doing those interviews, and I'm also asking my Polish friends and colleagues, and I can see, and of course I can see it in myself, but now it is changing, and it's been transforming recently. But how shameful for us in Poland is to actually accept this invitation for humans interview, you know, for humans of Gestalt interview. difficult that is, how, you know, yeah, this area it's still present in during this interview of fear and shame is a burden. It's not a transformative energy, so to speak, in a way. And so I wonder about my generation with people I trained. I finished my training like 4 or 5 years ago, maybe, yes, something like that. And I'm now tracing, you know, in through Facebook some other groups of younger generation of Gestalt therapists, and I can see some slight changes, and I wonder whether they would be eager to take part. Yeah, so this is something yeah, this is my, you know, maybe personal thing and sociological at the same time thing here, that it's so difficult for us with this ego, shame, all that.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. You know, I think there's probably a bit of that in Australia. Like, it's a different culture to America, you know, which seems to really embody that kind of self-promotion in some ways, or maybe the stereotypes of America. But you know, in Australia we have this thing. I don't know if this is a term that's used more widely, but the tall poppy syndrome. Have you heard of the tall poppy?
No, what's that?
No, so that's they talk about that being in Australia, like, so the tall poppy that grows above the other poppy flower will get cut down.
Okay.
You know, so they talk about that in Australia as like, we have tall poppy syndrome. Nobody wants to kind of stick their head up above the rest, because you'll be kind of cut down to size. So I think that's something in our culture, but also, yeah, I don't know. It's a funny thing. Like I said, that I'm just setting up my private practice, and I'm setting up a website, you know, and that's a funny thing, because I'm leaning in to yeah, like greater kind of self-promotion, and just like saying, hey, here's what I do, and getting a bit I certainly don't want to be too much of a salesman in my website, but I also don't want to like have a kind of false humility, or I don't want to kind of, I see a lot of therapists who are sort of, who seem to have a lot of hesitancy to do any form of self-promotion.
Yeah.
That's one thing. And then I see this other group of people, I'm thinking of people in Melbourne, I'm sure there's people around in Poland and anywhere else, thinking certain type of spiritual people, maybe they're doing tantra stuff, they're doing communication stuff, they're doing sort of courses, and they're like all about self-promotion. So I'm not into that either, but I do draw a little bit of inspiration from them. I'm like, okay, yeah, I can set up a really nice looking website, and I can get things looking nice, and I can talk about, I can talk confidently about things that I've done or achievements. Like, that's okay. But it feels like I'm kind of growing into that a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm maybe not like your colleagues as much. Like, when you asked me, I was like, yeah, cool, I'll do that. I didn't feel too much shame. I felt a bit nervous, but I didn't have a sense of like, oh no, I won't do that. But it is it feels a little bit like something that I'm growing into, is just to kind of be a bit more confident and just present myself confidently. Like, here are my ideas, here's what I do, this is who I am, and kind of feel okay and grounded in that. Yeah.
And okay, and how did that happen that you come to Gestalt therapy? Sorry.
Well, you could go back a long, I don't know how far back to go. How much time we got? I think I had a desire to practice therapy from probably about the age like 19. I saw a therapist when I was at that age, and he was did psychodrama, and I thought he was totally amazing. I think he was amazing. He's since died, but I think he was amazing. And I at that time remember thinking, I want to do what he's doing. You know, I want to do something like that. And then I did many other things, and then at maybe 23 or 24, I went to university and studied psychology, because I thought, okay, I'll become a psychologist.
And it was just, I don't know what it's like in Poland. I think it's probably better in the UK. It seems like psychology in the UK is pretty cool, has a pretty kind of critical edge to it. But in Australia, it's very much trying to like be a kind of model itself on the kind of, scientist practitioner kind of model. It wasn't interesting to me at all. I studied sociology. I know that you're a sociologist, and so I was much more into sociology. And so I somehow along that way kind of lost touch with the idea of practicing as a therapist, or I thought, oh, I'll do that in the future. But I'd gone into psychology and I just really didn't like it. So I ended up then doing academic work. Ended up actually getting a PhD in psychology, but it really wasn't. It was much more in sociology or anthropology, but it has psychology like written on the diploma. But so it wasn't until then I met my partner Amy, and so this is probably 9 years ago, and just as we met, she was starting to study Gestalt therapy. And I'd heard a bit about Gestalt. I knew about Fritz Perls. I'd heard a little bit. I was really interested, and then so she did 4 years of the course, and so we had a Sydney, our first son, and he was a baby at that time. So I'd go along to the intensive weekends. There's like 5 of them a year, 5 weekends, and Amy was still breastfeeding, so I'd take Sydney along there, and I just had a front row seat to this awesome community, and I was like, I want to be a part of this. This is what I imagined. I spent a lot of time in different kind of spiritual centers and meditation centers, and there were some things that really I ended up getting really turned off by. The kind of guru worship aspects and the kind of right way aspects, and the kind of rigidity that can set in such places. Yes. And in this, when I went on these Gestalt therapy weekends as an outsider, I didn't see any of that. I saw facilitators, teachers who were very human. I saw people who were dedicated to doing kind of personal work, but there was a kind of lightness and there was a spirit of playfulness and joy. So that was a really strong influence. And I guess by the time Amy was about 3 years into the course, 2 or 3 years, I'm like, I want to do that. But I waited until she finished, and then the year after she finished, I started. So that was 5 years ago now. Yeah. And then I guess gradually I've just been trying to kind of bring the work that I do, the academic work, I've been trying to bring that towards psychotherapy. And that seems to be working, especially now that I'm editing the psychotherapy journal. That's good. But so over the time that I was studying, I tried to pull my work as much as I could towards therapy, so I can get everything. So I'm not like operating over here, doing academic stuff, and therapy over here. I want to bring it all into one place. So that would be the ideal.
It is really, I mean, it doesn't take you so much time. I mean, because for years I've been trying to integrate those areas in different ways, and and sometimes it was a painful task to I got into so many arguments with sociologists about psychotherapy. Felt so ashamed being a therapist or a trainee. So,
oh, really?
Okay. Yeah. When your the trajectory seems really very fast. I mean, and successful. So now I can say, that's okay. But I imagine that some years back I would be very jealous. But say something more about this journal, how this idea came up. I mean, with this journal and with this specific, area, I imagine, psychotherapy and counseling, you said, or?
Yeah. Well, that's a journal. I mean, that's like a job. You know, I didn't start the journal. The journal's been in existence for 7 years now, 8 years. And it started out pretty small, and it's been kind of steadily growing. And I just saw a job advertised, you know, a 1 or 2 day a week role to edit the journal, and I applied for it. And because I'd published a fair bit, and I had experience with editing, and I was just finishing up my Gestalt therapy course, you know, I got the job. But I feel, you know, very lucky. It just gives me this. It gives me this reason to communicate with whoever I want. Like there's always a reason to contact, like, you know, anyone I've heard of, any, you know, I'm expanding the editorial board, you know, at the moment. And so I can just ask anyone, send an email to me, do you want to join the editorial board? You don't have to do much, join the board. And then I'm having conversations with people, you know, or do you want to contribute to this special issue? Or, so I feel, you know, actually quite blessed about that role, despite it feeling today, especially, I just, you know, it's a one-man band, so I have to do like everything. I copy edit as well. I do all the actual editing, the commas and the grammar, and you know, so I just spent a whole day doing that today, and I'm feeling quite exhausted by that. And I do feel like the journal is a kind of constant pressure in some ways. It's always moving, and if I take a break, it keeps moving, and I got to catch up, you know. But that said, I feel very blessed to have got that role. I get to write editorials. Like, you know, it's amazing. I get to just write an editorial about what I think about therapy, or invite whoever I want to write editorials. Or,
and is this, I mean, I understood this being a medium for this kind of bringing academic or sociology to Gestalt therapy or society, I don't know. So in this sense that you, that the some kind of some problems, I don't know, kind of areas that you touch in each edition is not specifically about Gestalt therapy, but more about outside of Gestalt therapy?
It's not, so it's not a Gestalt therapy journal. It's like a general psychotherapy and counseling journal.
Okay.
And so there hasn't been much about Gestalt therapy in it over the years, or hardly anything. I think most Gestalt therapists probably publish in Gestalt therapy journals. You know, it'd be good to bring a bit more in, and quite a few people on the like on the editorial board or on the research committee that I kind of answer to are Gestalt therapy trained. So there's a strong kind of Gestalt therapy presence in the organization in a way. But no, I can't push that too hard in the journal, because, you know, a lot of people's interests are kind of represented in the journal. So I have to account for a lot of different views. And
yes, but I wonder about, so I didn't get that it's not Gestalt therapy. You said that it's psychotherapy, but whether, because as you said, it is a medium of combining those two domains. So I wonder, I was convinced that maybe even other modalities are really even more self-centered. I mean, and somehow introverted. I mean, in that sense that they don't open to the social context, socio-political context. But apparently, thanks to this journal and people there, people write about broader issues, yes? Touch broader phenomena.
So you're talking about maybe taking more of a kind of sociological perspective, or bringing that to
cultural, anthropological, I wonder.
Yeah. I mean, I, you know, as the editor, I'm limited by what comes to the journal, by what people submit to the journal. And I guess the influence that I have so far, been in the role for about a year, the influence is mostly through, at the moment, it's setting up some special issues.
And so I've got a special issue coming out, hopefully by the end of this year, and that's on anti-oppressive practice. So that's certainly bringing in more of a kind of sociological, politicized kind of perspective. And so that's one way I've done that. I've got another special issue that I'm got a call for articles out now on COVID-19. But we're trying to attract a discussion around like the kind of political, philosophical and cultural implications of this. So rather than just like, okay, we're all doing Zoom counseling now, we're all doing Zoom therapy, we're trying to, we'll see whether we do actually attract this kind of thing, but we want people to write about, well, what does this mean in a broader sense, or for what does this mean for the field of psychotherapy, or what kind of cultural expressions does Zoom or the new ways of doing therapy promote or inhibit? Or so I'm trying to bring, yes, a kind of broader, more critical, more philosophical, more sociological perspective, but it's, you know, it feels in some ways like the journal is a kind of ship that has a fair bit of momentum, and I'm steering it a little bit, but it's got its own momentum as well, you know. So I steer it in that direction.
Anyway, good. It is a momentum, I guess, for therapy to go outside. I still remember one of my first days. It was like the beginning of the training, Gestalt training. It was not even the training, but the kind of preparatory year, whatever. And I started, like, there was the check-in, and I started something about, using some discourse, terminology or something. And someone said, you know, from the trainers that, this is too much intellectualism here, too much. And so I shut up for like next 3 years almost, thinking, almost. I'm of course exaggerating, but still somehow underlying how lucky you are, and you know, with no so much, I don't know, without experiencing so much tension between those two domains.
No, I've experienced tension in them to an extent. I felt, you know, I in some ways I felt ready for. I got the same message that you did. I got that message, like, okay, move out of your head and tell us what you're feeling in your stomach, or tell us, you know, and I was ready for that. I wanted that, and I was working in a kind of academic. I was finishing my PhD and working in a kind of academic type space, you know. Anyway, so and I'd spent enough time in universities that coming to a place where people were speaking from their bellies, or talking about how their skin felt hot or their hands were shaking. You know, that's what I wanted at that time. But I'm not. Yeah, that said, I'm not such a fan of the kind of. There's an anti-intellectual kind of impulse in the Gestalt tradition, which I'm sure came from Fritz Perls himself, and yeah, I'm not the hugest fan of that. But I'm also, you know, I wouldn't want to go into a kind of certain parts of the psychoanalytic scene, or, you know, they're kind of hyper intellectual, you know, and I don't want that either. So yeah, somehow I want to find a place which for the moment seems to be like, well, Gestalt therapy is a good place for me, but I'm going to be up the kind of intellectual. I'm going to be more into thinking and writing probably than some others. And I want to find the kind of, you know, my people in the community, whether it's via Zoom or whether people in Melbourne who are also into similar things, and they're around. Of course, they're around, the people who you know, write in journals, Gestalt journals. Yeah.
And okay, so so your attraction to Gestalt therapy has that changed over those years of your training, or you are still around the same, area, concepts in terms of theory, in terms of practice, or
I think probably my ideas changed. I think at some point, I don't know if I was ever looking for this in Gestalt, but certainly before that, I was looking for like, what is right? What is right and what is true. I got to find like the best theory or whatever, the best things that are describing the most cutting edge, or, that are the most right. And I think now how I feel is like, what I'm more attracted to the community, to the community. So I'm like, well, what are the people like in this community? Are they the type of people that I want to be in a community with? And the answer is generally yes. I think I'm, like I said, I'm probably a little bit more into kind of ideas and a little bit more intellectual than some. But in general, yeah, they're the type of people that I want to be around. And I don't think any, if you look at any good the common factors research, it's just so obvious that no therapeutic tradition has a monopoly on good practice or has a monopoly on the truth. And I think everyone is aware of that now. And so it's more, I guess, being a part of the Gestalt community for me is more of a kind of aesthetic choice. It's like, what type of people do I want to be around? What type of words do I like? What type of conferences do I want to go to? And how do the concepts in this resonate with me? And generally they do resonate, but yeah, I'm not always I'm blown away by the state of the theory in Gestalt therapy. I think it has some gaping holes and it has some problems and it has some confusions in various areas, but on the whole, I really, yeah, it's the type of community that I want to be engaged with, I guess.
Okay, and what do you think? It's probably the last question. What do you think will happen in the future with this community? How are we going to develop, or are we going to extinct? Or yeah.
Yeah, I've got no idea. I hope, I would like to be able to, I like the idea of just kind of settling in and saying, yeah, like I'm choosing this. I like this community of practice and I'm choosing this community, and I would like for it to maintain a sense of vitality, to have lots of people still training and lots of things happening, like the things that you're doing, like the things that New Gestalt Voices, that kind of thing. And I know you're involved with that, and what you're doing here and what they're doing there, that gives me a sense of like, a sense of kind of like hope for the future. Like, oh, cool. Okay, there are other people who are young people who are finishing their training and who are bringing there's a new kind of generation coming up. That makes me feel hopeful. So I feel hope around that, but I think, yeah, going back to the idea of like the common factors, in psychotherapy, I think that research is so compelling that it kind of, it suggests that maybe the era of different psychotherapeutic camps, needs to come to a close at some point, or should come to a close, or might come to a close. So I don't know how that's all gonna play out. But I hope that the Gestalt therapy tradition maintains a sense of vitality and that I can stay involved in it in some way.
Okay. Thank you for this conversation. How was it for you? Is it okay, or how are you feeling? What your belly tells you?
with my what?
Belly tells you.
Oh, what does my belly tell me? I'm quite relaxed. It was good. It felt like an actual conversation. I wasn't
I didn't feel like I was on pre-prepared ground for that much of it at all. So that was nice. It just felt like a kind of natural conversation. Yeah, I'm not used to being like filmed and having the idea of that film going up on the internet, but I think I kind of forgot about that for a fair amount of the time.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay, so looking forward to next kind of getting together and talking and so thank you and have a good night. I don't know, evening.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So we finished the recording now?
We can finish.